Hello, I'm Deb Cheslow, and in this four-part series, I'll be sharing information related to the awareness and prevention of domestic violence and violence against women. Did you know that every 9 seconds a woman is abused by her intimate partner? And every 36 hours in the state of Florida, a woman is murdered by her intimate partner. Joining me to discuss dating violence are Trish Giacconi and RJ Larizza. Trish has worked in the domestic violence sexual assault advocacy movement for 10 years with a focus on community collaboration regarding victim support and perpetrator accountability. Trish is the CEO of the Family Life Center serving Flagler County. RJ Larizza is in his third term as the elected state attorney for the 7th Judicial Circuit. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Hi.
So Trish, it sounds like you've had quite the career. Tell me a little bit more about what you've done and why this is so important to you.
I got involved at the Family Life Center 10 years ago. Originally, it was an administrative job, but it really resonated with me. I am a survivor, and I just felt as though it was the place for me to be able to educate our community, support victims in relation to dating violence and domestic abuse.
Wonderful. And how about you, RJ? Third term as the state attorney. What led to that? And a little bit about your background, please.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I started my professional career in 1980 after graduating with a criminal justice degree. Went to work as a probation officer with the Florida Department of Corrections. Did that for 13 years, supervised sex offenders, youthful offenders, standard caseloads, house arrest caseloads, and I became a supervisor. But I wanted to be a lawyer, wanted to be a prosecutor. So packed up my family, went to Macon, Georgia, went to law school at Mercer University, got my degree, graduated in 1996. Prosecuted for 6 years in St. Augustine, Florida, did domestic cases, sexual batteries, child sexual abuse, lewd and lascivious type cases, kidnappings, murders, burglaries, grand thefts, did a wide range of violent felony offenses. And after that, I went into private practice for 6 years. Then I decided to run for state attorney. I was successful, and I've been your state attorney ever since.
And here we are on our third term.
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So, Trish, what is dating violence? That's a relatively new term in society compared to domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. So dating violence is very similar to domestic violence, except for the partners are not married. So they share intimate relationship. They have an understanding of one another. They do not share children in common. And so dating violence is when one of the dating partners is attempting to control another partner, but they may not be living together. And they do that through a variety of methods.
But they could be living together. Is marriage the actual distinction?
So actually, under the domestic violence term, they're usually living as if a family. But in the dating violence, they do not have to be living together.
Right, that's kind of a distinction, that they have to have a romantic or intimate relationship. Romantic is not really defined in the Florida statutes, so you have to use a little common sense in that regard. But it distinguishes itself from domestic violence, where they may have a child in common, they may be married or living together as husband and wife, even if they're not married. That would be at the domestic violence end versus dating violence. And I think the legislature wanted to capture violence that goes on in a dating relationship like they do domestic violence. They felt like that was something that needed to be addressed. I think Trish would attest to that as well, and so that's what we're doing.
So is that distinction in order to bring more problems to light or to be able to solve more issues, or is there a distinction in how they're handled and the levels of penalty and things of that sort?
Some of the penalties really depend on the facts and circumstances, the label or the designation of dating violence. The significance there would be in the injunctions. There was no when they created dating violence, They also created an avenue for folks to get injunctions against a perpetrator who may be subjecting the other party to dating violence. Before that designation, you couldn't do that. So the law has responded to what I think is an awareness of how our society, of these problems, these control problems, these violence, these emotional wrenching of your partners to try and control them. And they're trying to expand it because it's not just clear-cut when somebody's married or they've had kids. It can happen in a wide variety of relationships.
It's really in response to the complexities of relationships, ultimately. So when we're speaking about dating violence, they're not married, they don't share children. And so it really, as RJ had mentioned, it really captures a relationship where there's abuse that did not fit the typical definition of domestic violence.
So let's bring the true severity or nature of the problem to light here. Do you have some statistics you'd like to share?
So 1.5 million adolescents in a year is a victim of dating violence.
1.5 million.
1.5 million.
In Florida, in the United States? In the United States. My
That's
goodness.
1 out of 3 adolescents are victimized, either physically, emotionally, by their dating partner. That's a significant amount of young people within our community, locally and nationally, that are victims of dating violence. Prior to the distinction of dating violence, there were many who did not have a title for what they were going through, did not understand what they were going through. So having the distinction of a dating violence allows people to recognize that they are being victimized and to then have some legal recourse if they'd like.
Is this mainly an adolescent problem, or does it span all ages?
It actually spans all ages, but we recognize it more with our youth. But it does span all ages.
Sure. I mean, folks date, they start, well, I know when I was a kid, you didn't start dating until you were in high school. May start a little earlier these days, but I think there's different problems, too, with different age levels. One, there's no age designation for dating violence. Two, when you're dealing with high schoolers, or maybe even middle schoolers sometimes that get involved in a romantic relationship, and unfortunately sometimes in an intimate relationship, those dynamics, I think, are a little different than when you might deal with two folks who have been married. Maybe they're a survivor, a widow, widowers, and they get together at a senior citizens dance, and then they start dating. I mean, so, and everything in between. So really, it's a fact-specific, case-by-case scenario on what the proper way to try and address those particular instances of dating violence.
And it sounds like we're dealing with an issue of inexperience. People, as opposed to domestic violence, they're a couple. In this case, there's not a lot of experience dating for the younger folks, especially.
Right.
Or even for someone that's been married for 40 years and lost their partner, and now they're back out in the dating. So no experience. It starts kind of benign, and then how do we typically see it escalate?
Well, particularly with the younger group, what we notice happens is the utilization of social media, and often the texting and the constant, checking in on someone and knowing where they are. So it starts very subtly. With an idea that, they care about where I am. They're concerned for my overall well-being. And so it starts, again, very inconspicuously, but then it escalates to where it's, I want to know where you are every hour. And then it again, can lead into physical violence.
And I can tell you some of the really disturbing things that we see are like with young kids, they got phones now. Sure. And those phones record. And then you could have instances where kids are recording their dating partner when they're engaged in an intimate sexual activity, and then sharing it with other individuals, and then ultimately it gets posted on websites. I mean, part of that is the inexperience. These are kids that are growing up in an age where, you have information at your fingertips. You can look anything up. You can record anything. And this retaliation when dating couples break up, and if they were engaged in activities where they took photographs or videos, you can actually prosecute those things too, depending on the circumstances. If some intimate photographs or videos are used in retaliation or in an attempt to harm an individual with their job with DCF. We've had folks fabricate things, send them to people's employers, or send intimate pictures to employers. We've had them send them to DCF, making allegations that these folks then have to defend. I mean, so it's a brave new world, for lack of a better term, and with this technology in the hands of kids, it's scary sometimes of what can happen.
So dating violence, obviously there's physical violence
Right.
that is tantamount to or comparable to domestic violence at its extreme. But
Right.
you're talking about now porn, essentially, cyber violence. There's an emotional side, I'm sure. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the span of what is considered dating violence, because I think there's a lot of people out there that don't even realize, hey, this is me, and they're putting up with things they should not be putting up with. So signs, symptoms.
So some of the signs of being a victim of dating violence, as I had mentioned earlier, are when the perpetrator is wanting constant information as to your location, where there's an enormous amount of jealousy, not allowing the partner to do things that they want to do, preventing them from participating in activities they historically have participated in, really isolating that dating partner. So indicating that, I don't want you to hang out with those friends anymore, or, you have to be with me and come with me. And, it then suddenly becomes about the partner versus the victim, and it's not a mutual relationship. I think that's where we see some of the larger issues that happen. There's an emotional abuse, demeaning, of that partner, and speaking poorly of them, calling them names, threatening them with perhaps some, intimate photos, things that they have done, threatening where they're working at. So there's a lot of different ways that you can see the red flags. I think sometimes young people don't necessarily know where to go to receive any assistance. They're not sure that they're a victim of dating violence, because it is something that is very common. And people think, well, that's just the way, boys behave. How many of us have grown up where we say, oh, that's a typical boy behavior. When the boys like you, they pull your hair. So we kind of have this ingrained that if boys like us, it's, they're going to do something that's negative to us, and that's a sign that they like us. And so really kind of breaking that stigma and that social view that if they care about you, they're not going to want to harm you. So letting young people know that it's not okay, that behavior is not acceptable. And there are resources, there is help out there. We advocate first and foremost to speak to parents. That isn't always an option for some folks. And so if they can't do that, they can always reach out to their local domestic violence center. Certified centers are trained to work with victims of dating violence. But if that's not an option, they can contact their school guidance counselor, their school resource officer. So there are things and ways that victims can speak up. If they're not sure, they can always contact the hotline and ask, these are some of the things that are happening to me. Am I a victim? Is this something that I need to be concerned with? And an advocate can explain that to them and walk them through that.
Yeah, you're looking at power and control, and then vindictiveness, retaliation. Those are put in just simple terms, things, whatever could fit in those categories. We prosecuted a woman that's in prison right now in St. Johns County who, when she broke up with she broke up with a man that she was having an affair with, and he was married. So then she started sending videos and making allegations, and ultimately wound up committing more than just what would be considered a dating violence crime. But I think the point to be made is dating violence, some people may say, oh, what's the big deal? Well, dating violence could be the tip of the iceberg. And that dating violence can lead to much more sinister and much more violent crimes. And so I think it's important for us to be honest. And Tricia and I have had quite a few conversations about, how we can attack this problem and be realistic and be honest with each other and with the communities about how we can try to make this better and how we can try to mitigate or eliminate at least some of these instances.
And I think one of the important things to note is that, as RJ said, it is a precursor. And what we know about dating violence is that it escalates and can then lead to obvious domestic violence, which ultimately leads down a path of continued power and control and abuse. So if there are signs that are being recognized now, it's ask for help now before it gets to that point of it's too late and someone can end up dead.
Now,
And yeah, you want to get the perpetrator too. You want to get them help. You want to try and get them to stop. And if they're young, and maybe this is some learned or observed behavior, maybe you can nip that in the bud. But dating violence can lead to domestic violence. It can lead to sexual assault and sexual battery, and it can lead to homicide. In the Seventh Judicial Circuit, one out of every 4 murders we prosecute or have a domestic nexus, family member, husband, wife, brother, sister, mother, father, son, daughter, those kind of things. 1 out of every 4, and that does not include the murder-suicides that you read about and hear about that happen all over the country.
And doesn't include all the people that have not reported an issue, less than
That's
murder.
true.
Those are staggering numbers.
1 out of 4.
So if we could nip this in the bud at the dating side, are there any legal implications, or not implications, but,
Strategies, maybe?
well, when am I dating? If I went out with a person once, can I report dating violence? Or do you have to have 3
Romantic-
dates or 5 dates
Right.
or?
Romantic or intimate. Intimate's pretty easy.
Sure.
Okay, I would take a common sense approach. Intimate means they're engaging in sexual activity. And then I won't get too graphic about it, but we'd say sexual activity. Romantic is open for more interpretation. And I'm not sure what the case law is out there right now and how much it's been developed. But that would be the guide that we would look at. In other words, courts can interpret if a statute is a little vague or if it needs to be better defined, the appellate courts can narrow that down and define romantic a little bit more for us. But suffice it to say, it's folks that like each other, and not just in a friend way, like brother and sister type thing, but they are attracted to each other in a sexual way. I think would be fair to say, wouldn't you, Trish? But not necessarily being intimate at that time.
So why, I mean, it's very obvious when something's not pleasant, when we don't like what is being said to us or done to us, but yet we still have this issue, people stay in the relationship.
Right.
Why do you think that? I mean, the obvious answer is, well, leave them, leave her, but they don't. They stick around. Why is that?
From my experience, I have found that a lot of young people don't understand the definition of a healthy relationship. And so they hear or see on media that, you know, all relationships have problems. And so they kind of put it under that category of, oh, this is a problem, it'll get better, maybe it's me and not them. And so they really are trying to define and decipher what that means. And you know, we don't know what they've been exposed to in their history, what they've been taught at home. So it's really being able to define for people, what is a healthy dating relationship?
And peer pressure, especially them young kids in high school, and they like the person, or there's status attached to a certain person that they believe or perceive there is. There's so many different reasons why folks might stick around, even when it's not a marriage with kids, which are obvious reasons why it's hard to back out of a relationship. And so I think, and what Trish said is very true about that folks don't always understand, especially youngsters, about, you know, what is a healthy dating relationship. Maybe we can work to try and get some help with the school districts. We've talked about this, to get some curriculum or some ability for kids at least, to be this subject to be broached in the schools with them so that they can at least be better educated about what constitutes a healthy relationship, what doesn't, and where they can go to get help.
Now, how young are we talking here? Are you speaking to college-age kids, or are you going down into high school, down into middle school?
What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you that the youngest victim of dating violence that I have worked with personally was 11.
11 years old.
11 years old. In our community in Flagler, I was called in to speak to 6th graders to talk about healthy relationships because of some of the things the guidance counselors had been seeing. So we are talking as young as elementary school, all the way up to senior citizens.
And I imagine the online dating scene is contributing to this problem?
Oh, the online dating scene, absolutely. There's a lot of deception and inappropriate behavior that happens online. And it translates then into face-to-face interactions, and vice versa. You know, social media is also being used as a tool for abuse, and cyberbullying and threatening behavior. So it's both ways. You know, it's using it to engage in inappropriate behavior, and it's also using it to get people, you know, to start dating them and then engage in inappropriate behavior.
And I say, look, use that vast array of information to your benefit. You know, Google, you can Google folks. I mean, you ever Google yourself and you can see, oh my
Sure.
gosh, look at all this information. So, I mean, folks kids know better than I do how to use that phone and Google up information. They can look up, if you can look up the person. You can see if they've got any criminal charges. You can, you know, if they're in the adult system, you can kind of you can find out things about them. My point is, the information is, all this array of information is not bad. It can be good, but you have to use it that way. It's not that, it's kind of like a lot of other things. The information, the ability, the technology is not bad, but the way people use it can be bad.
Well, it can be as simple as that there is a list of all known perpetrators, right?
I'm sure
do
that then you got to look at the source too. You know, I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of due diligence you got to put out there as far as what you believe and what you don't. Because let's face it, anybody with a phone and a keyboard can pretty much get on and post things and say things and do things. So you've got to, you can't just take anything at face value, I think. And that goes for dating especially. You know, I had somebody call me one time because some folks met in a online dating relationship and wanted to get together, and the person knew that I knew this other person and said, what can you tell me about them? So, I mean, it could be as simple as trying to, somebody that might know that person, you know, what can you tell me about them, kind of a thing, too.
So what can friends and family do to help if they're seeing it and the victim is not seeing it?
So oftentimes family and friends, you know, their gut reaction is to say, stay away from that person, you're doing it wrong. And ultimately what happens is you're putting that victim in a defensive position. And so we never want to do that. We want to encourage that victim in ways that are going to be more collaborative versus, you know, me against you. I'm more likely to receive information when we look at it together, versus the other way. So family and friends can sit down and say, you know, I've noticed some things. You know, what have you noticed? What do you think about this? And maybe just start dropping some of the seeds there and planting seeds so that folks can kind of take a minute to cultivate that on their own. They can also provide them resources within their local community. And then they can really give them a safe space to share without judgment. And I think for young people, that's the biggest thing is, you know, when they're dating, they want to feel grown up. And so when we approach them about dating and inappropriate behavior, we want to include them in the conversation, make them part of the discussion versus I know better than you, and then now suddenly they're not interested in speaking with us about it.
Sure, that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
And I want to make sure we cover also, though, we talked about earlier, this spans all ages
Right.
and all genders.
Right.
And we've talked a lot about the younger generation.
Yes.
But what about the middle-aged people out there that are sitting there thinking right now, ooh, maybe that's me? Or what about the opening example of the couple who've been married 30, 40 years and they lose their partner, now they're new to the dating scene? What kind of resources are out there for people that can't turn to their parents?
So again, the local certified domestic violence centers in their community are very well trained to work with victims of all ages. And so if they are concerned or unsure, they can call their local confidential hotline, which, you know, it's anonymous. They don't have to give their name and just get some information and some resources. Believe it or not, they have support groups for individuals that are victims of dating violence specifically, so that they can then feel the support and recognize some of the signs or recognize some of the things that they can do to help them in that situation.
And, you know, just like youngsters or young kids, high school kids, senior citizens, middle-aged folks, you know, there's a shame factor there too. They don't want to admit if, you know, that they might be wrong, and they might be ashamed. How could I let this happen? You know, and they don't want to report it. So, you know, again, just like with kids, you don't want to put them on the defensive. You know, the old saying, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. You know, you give and you tell people we've developed a laundry list of things that would be red flags. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, well, you know, you don't have to say anything. How about, has this happened? Has this happened? Or, you know, do they want to know where you're at? Are they calling you all the time? Are they, you know, there's a whole bunch of things that you can just say, are you experiencing this? And if you are, and then it's something you might want to think about, you know, because information is power, and you empower these folks because ultimately for them to get out of a relationship, they've got to want to. And you've got to empower them to feel strong enough that this is the right thing to do.
Exactly.
Yes, ma'am.
So, as with domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, the bottom line is it's not okay for someone to do something that you don't want them to do, to
Not
make you
okay.
feel a
It's not
way
okay.
that you don't want to feel. And the answer is to reach out. Step one is to reach out because there are anonymous or confidential or both resources where you can get answers. Identify, is this me? Identify what to do next. And then we take it from there, right?
Yeah, you don't
Yes.
want to accuse them. You don't want them to feel uncomfortable. Got to use a little psychology, as my mom used to
Exactly.
say, you know, and
All
just
right.
just help them to open their eyes a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here and sharing such valuable information. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you or someone you know is involved in an abusive relationship or has experienced dating violence in any way, there is help. Stay with us for information on where to go for assistance. And again, many thanks to the Department of Justice and the Office on Violence Against Women for making this programming possible.